This is CNN.
A Milwaukee jury is set to decide Jeffrey Dahmer's fate.
From floods to fire, weary Southern Californians get slammed some more. Welcome to this Saturday edition of Early Prime. I'm Andrea Arceneaux.
And I'm Jonathan Mann. In just a few moments from now, we are expecting an announcement of 15 verdicts in the Jeffrey Dahmer sanity trial. You're looking now at a live picture of the Milwaukee courtroom that is slowly filling with court officials, prosecution, and defense lawyers, and it already has a packed stand of members of the families of Jeffrey Dahmer's victims. Once again, the jury has told court authorities it has reached its verdicts in the case. We are expecting to hear those verdicts any moment now, and we will go to it live as soon as the jury is ready to make its statement. Andrea?
Southern California still reeling from a series of rainstorms that killed at least 8 people. Got more rain this morning. Today's storm was the 4th in a week, but not as severe as earlier ones. In Los Angeles and Ventura counties, the Red Cross opened emergency shelters to help hundreds of people who've evacuated or have been left homeless. Today's preparations for future rain included filling bags with sand. In other areas, plastic blankets were placed over saturated hillsides to prevent erosion. There's more mud and rock slides in the region, and some roads were closed. And with the latest on California rains, here's Ted Textor. Ted?
Andrea, thank you. The good news is that the rain is beginning to taper off some, and it is more spotty, more scattered in nature rather than general coverage. You can see, though, still lots of moisture moving on shore. The big band of showers now moving east and into the higher elevations where it's turning into snow. So anywhere from about 4,000 to 5,000 foot in elevation at those levels from the south on up to the north through California through the ranges, Sierra Nevadas. There are watches, warnings, advisories out tonight for more wintry type weather with heavy snows expected there. You can see with the spinning too, another band of moisture that's moving on shore. Notice though that the basic bulk of the moisture is a little bit further to the north where the rains will be just a little bit heavier. Back behind now there is some clearing, so overall the weather looks like it's going to be improving over the next 12 to 24 hours. From Malibu there was a lot of flooding through the morning hours. Again, the rains began once again throughout the late night into the morning. Overall, though, it is beginning to taper off some. So as this water gradually subsides, the threat of more flooding will likely diminish over the next, again, 12 to 24 hours. We'll have more on your weather across the nation as well. Now here's Jonathan.
Thanks, Ted. Los Angeles fire officials say they don't know yet. We are looking now at live pictures that you're seeing. Jeffrey Dahmer entering the courtroom to find out what the jury has decided in the 15 killings that he has pleaded guilty but insane to. A verdict is expected any moment. It has already been reached. It was reached earlier in the afternoon. We're waiting now to hear from the jury. After 13 years of murders and mutilations, 17 that Dahmer has confessed to, 15 for which he's been charged, 2 weeks of testimony at the courtroom you're now seeing, and about a day's deliberations, the jury is about to announce its verdict. You can see Dahmer's back. Those were, I believe, his parents waiting for the verdict. Dahmer, we should note once again, has pleaded guilty. This is not a question of guilt or innocence that we're about to hear, but whether Dahmer was sane or insane at the time of the killings, each of the 15 of them. If he is judged sane, he will be subject to a sentence of life in prison for each of the murders. If he's judged insane, he'll be committed to a mental institution from which he can request release every 6 months. You're seeing spectators rising.
Hearing, Circuit Court Branch 33 in the Fort Milwaukee County is now in session. The Honorable Lawrence C. Graham, Jr. presiding. Silence is commanded. You may be seated.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I understand you have arrived at verdicts in this matter. Would you hand the verdicts to the bailiff, please?
We're watching now as Circuit Court Judge Lawrence Graham looks at the verdict that has been reached. We're waiting once again for the verdict in the Jeffrey Dahmer sanity trial to be read out. Dahmer has pleaded guilty but insane to 15 counts of murder. We're waiting to hear if the jury has agreed that he was insane and could not control his actions at the time of the murders.
Jurors, I am now going to read your verdicts to you, after which I will make inquiry of you as to whether or not, indeed, I have accurately read the verdicts to you. In the state of Wisconsin versus Jeffrey Dahmer, case number F912542, a special verdict. Question 1. At the time the crime was committed in count 1 of the information in regard to the death of James E. Dockstader, did the defendant, Jeffrey L. Dahmer, have a mental disease? Answer, no. There are 2 dissenting jurors, Claire Marie Horvath as to question 1, Russell P. Fenstermaker as to question 1. It's signed by Todd P. Tomlin as the foreman of the jury. Maybe a good way to do this, counsel, is if I would inquire at each stage whether or not this accurately reflects the... Other than Juror Horvath and Fenstermacher, do you all agree with the answer that I have read to you? Everybody agrees that I have correctly read it? That's it. Again, in the state of Wisconsin versus Jeffrey Dahmer, case number F912542, in a special verdict, question number 1. At the time the crime was committed in count 2 of the information, in regard to the death of Richard Guerrero, did the defendant, Jeffrey L. Dahmer, have a mental disease? Answer, no. Question number 2 need not be answered. There are 2 dissenting jurors, Claire Marie Horvath as to question number 1, Russell P. Fenstermaker as to question number 1, signed by Todd P. Tomlin. Again, other than jurors Horvath and Fenstermaker, do you all agree that this is your verdict? Everybody agrees? Again, in the state of Wisconsin versus Jeffrey Dahmer, case number F912542, question number 1. At the time the crime was committed in count 3 of the information, in regard to the death of Anthony Sears, did the defendant, Jeffrey L. Dahmer, have a mental disease? Answer, no. As to question number 2, it need not be answered. Dissenting jurors, Claire Marie Horvath as to question number 1, Russell P. Fenstermaker as to question number 1, signed by Todd P. Tomlin as foreman of the jury. I suppose I should be indicating that all these verdicts are dated the 15th day of February, 1992. Again, other than jurors Horvath and Fenstermaker, do you all agree that indeed this is your verdict? State of Wisconsin versus Jeffrey Dahmer, case number F912542, special verdict, question number 1. At the time the crime was committed in count 4 of the information, in regard to the death of Raymond Smith, also known as Ricky Beeks, did the defendant, Jeffrey L. Dahmer, have a mental disease? Answer, no. Again, dissenting jurors, Claire Marie Horvath as to question number 1, Russell P. Fenstermaker as to question number 1, dated on the 15th day of February 1992 and signed by the foreman of the jury, Todd R. Tomlin. Jurors, other than the two dissenting jurors, do you all agree that this indeed is your verdict? State of Wisconsin versus Jeffrey L. Dahmer, case number F912542. Question number 1. At the time the crime was committed in count 5 of the information in regard to the death of Edward W. Smith, did the defendant, Jeffrey L. Dahmer, have a mental disease? Answer, no. Question number 2 need not be answered. Dissenting jurors, Claire Marie Horvath as to question number 1, Russell P. Fenstermaker as to question number 1, dated Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 15th day of February 1992, signed by Todd P. Tomlin as foreman of the jury. Again, other than those who have dissented, do all of you, each and every one of you, agree that this is your verdict? State of Wisconsin versus Jeffrey L. Dahmer, case number F912542, special verdict, question number 1. At the time the crime was committed in count 6 of the information in regard to the death of Ernest Miller, did the defendant, Jeffrey L. Dahmer, have a mental disease? Answer, no. And again, question 2 need not be answered. Dissenting jurors, Claire Marie Horvath as to question 1, Russell P. Fenstermaker as to question number 1, dated the 15th day of February 1992 and signed by Todd P. Tomlin as foreman of the jury. Again, jurors, other than those who dissented, do all of you agree that this indeed is your verdict? State of Wisconsin versus Jeffrey L. Dahmer, case number F912542, special verdict, question number 1. At the time the crime was committed in count 7 of the information in regard to the death of David Thomas, did the defendant, Jeffrey L. Dahmer, have a mental disease? Answer, no. Question number 2 need not be answered. There were dissenting jurors, Claire Marie Horvath as to question number 1, Russell P. Fenstermaker as to question number 1. This is dated the 15th day of February 1992 and signed by Todd P. Tomlin as foreman of the jury. Again, jurors, other than for the dissenting jurors, do you all agree that this is your verdict? State of Wisconsin versus Jeffrey L. Dahmer, case number F912542, special verdict, question number 1. At the time the crime was committed in count 8 of the information in regard to the death of Curtis Strauter, did the defendant, Jeffrey L. Dahmer, have a mental disease? Answer, no. Question number 2 need not be answered. Dated at Milwaukee, Wisconsin, this 15th day of February 1992, dissenting jurors, Claire Marie Horvath as to question 1, Russell P. Fenstermaker as to question number 1, signed by Todd P. Tomlin as foreman of the jury. Jurors, other than those of you who have dissented, do all of you agree that this indeed is your verdict? State of Wisconsin versus Jeffrey L. Dahmer, case number F912542, special verdict, question number 1. At the time the crime was committed in count 9 of the information in regard to the death of Errol Lindsay, did the defendant, Jeffrey L. Dahmer, have a mental disease? Answer, no. Question 2 need not be answered, and this is dated Milwaukee, Wisconsin on the 15th day of February 1992. Dissenting jurors, Claire Marie Horvath as to question number 1, Russell P. Fenstermaker as to question number 1, signed by Todd P. Tomlin as foreman of the jury. Jurors, other than for those of you who have dissented, do you all agree that this indeed is your verdict? State of Wisconsin versus Jeffrey L. Dahmer, case number F912542. Special verdict, question number 1. At the time the crime was committed in count 10 of the information in regard to the death of Tony Anthony Hughes, Did the defendant, Jeffrey L. Dahmer, have a mental disease? Answer, no. Question number 2 need not be answered. Dated at Milwaukee, Wisconsin, this 15th day of February, 1992. Dissenting jurors, Claire Marie Horvath as to question 1, Russell P. Fenstermaker as to question number 1. Signed by Todd P. Tomlin as foreman of the jury. Ladies and other than those of you who have dissented, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, do you agree that this is your verdict? State of Wisconsin versus Jeffrey Dahmer, case number F912542. Special verdict, question number 1. At the time the crime was committed in count 11 of the information, in regard to the death of Conorak Synthesymphone, did the defendant, Jeffrey L. Dahmer, have a mental disease? Answer, no. Question number 2 need not be answered. Dated in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, this 15th day of February, 1992. Dissenting jurors, Claire Marie Horvath as to question number 1, Russell P. Fenstermaker as to question number 1. Signed by Todd P. Tomlin as foreman of the jury. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, other than the dissenting jurors, do you all agree that this indeed is your verdict? State of Wisconsin versus Jeffrey Dahmer, case number F912542, special verdict, question number 1. At the time the crime was committed in count 12 of the information in regard to the death of Matt Turner, also known as Donald Montrell, did the defendant Jeffrey L. Dahmer have a mental disease? Answer, no. Question number 2 need not be answered. Dated at Milwaukee, Wisconsin, this 15th day of February, 1992, dissenting jurors, Claire Marie Horvath as to question number 1, Russell P. Fenstermaker as to question number 1, signed by Todd P. Tomlin as foreman of the jury. Again, jurors, other than dissenting jurors, do you all agree that this indeed is the verdict of the jury? State of Wisconsin versus Jeffrey L. Dahmer, case number F912542, special verdict. Question number 1. At the time the crime was committed in count 13 of the information in regard to the death of Jeremiah Weinberger, did the defendant Jeffrey L. Dahmer have a mental disease? Answer, no. Question number 2 need not be answered. Dated at Milwaukee, Wisconsin, this 15th day of February, 1992. Dissenting jurors, Claire Marie Horvath as to question number 1, Russell P. Fenstermaker as to question number 1, signed by Todd P. Tomlin as foreman of the jury. Jurors, again, I inquire of you, other than for the dissenting jurors, do you all agree that this indeed is your verdict? State of Wisconsin versus Jeffrey L. Dahmer. Case number F912542, special verdict, question number 1. The time the crime was committed in count 14 of the information in regard to the death of Oliver Lacey, did the defendant Jeffrey L. Dahmer have a mental disease? Answer, no. Question number 2 need not be answered. Dated in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, this 15th day of February, 1992, dissenting jurors, Claire Marie Horvath as to question number 1, Russell P. Fenstermaker as to question number 1, signed by Todd P. Tomlin as foreman of the jury. Other than those of you who have indicated your dissents, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, do you all agree that this is your verdict? State of Wisconsin versus Jeffrey L. Dahmer, case number F912542, special verdict. Question number 1. The time the crime was committed in count 15 of the information in regard to the death of Joseph Bredehoff, did the defendant Jeffrey L. Dahmer have a mental disease? Answer, no. Question number 2 need not be answered. Dated at Milwaukee, Wisconsin, this 15th day of February, 1992. Claire Marie Horvath, dissenting jurors are Claire Marie Horvath as to question number 1, Russell P. Fenstermaker as to question number 1, signed by Todd P. Tomlin as foreman of the jury. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, other than for those who have indicated their dissents, do you all agree that this is your verdict? Jurors, I've read 15 verdicts to you. Do you all agree that I have accurately read those verdicts to you? Counsel, do you have anything further for the jury? Mr. McCann, for the jury?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Boyle?
No, I think the polling has been taken, has now been taking place properly.
Jurors, I'm about to excuse you, but before I do so, I think there's some thank yous and acknowledgments that I should make. First of all, I would like to share with you some information about some of the people who have made things a lot easier for all of us during the course of this trial. I'd like to mention to you the name of Dan Petrinas. Dan Petrinas carries the title of Media Coordinator for this district. And he is the man who is responsible for coordinating all the various media people, many of you whom you have not seen. And I think he just did an outstanding job in his efforts in regard to this case. I would like to express my personal appreciation for his efforts, and I think you as jurors should know that the job for all of us was made much easier because of his efforts. Lieutenant Fred Klopp, of the Sheriff's Department. A lot had to be done in the way of security in connection with this. Lieutenant Klopp was working on this months ago in terms setting up the arrangements. He did a highly professional job, a job for which I am grateful and which all the participants in this case should be grateful. Then there's some deputies that you had a little more closer contact with, the ones who were assigned to you. You know better than I what kind of job they did, but John and Frank are the regular deputies assigned to this court, and I know the quality of the work they do. And I would like to say that I appreciate their efforts as well as the court staff. You know, Vicki sitting in front of me, Mary, who's been with me as a court reporter for how many years, Mary? 14 years. I tell you, I couldn't do what I do up here if I didn't have people like that working here. So I am very grateful for their efforts. I'm very grateful for the efforts of all of the people, not the least of whom were two of the finest attorneys in Milwaukee, the state of Wisconsin, and I dare say in the United States. And I'm very grateful for their efforts, because what I do up here couldn't possibly be done without the cooperation of two outstanding trial attorneys. And 14 of you, only 2 of you sitting in the jury box now, but the other 2, I believe, are in the courtroom over here, right? Yeah. You know, we talked to you at the beginning of the case about citizen responsibility and how, in order to give people a fair trial, it's necessary to have a cross-section of people from the community. It's always the case that some people are asked to give more than others. And certainly the 14 people who sat through these 3 weeks have given more than just many, many people in this community to make this system work. My goal, my personal goal in terms of this trial, was to make it a sound, professional, legal trial. To show that in Milwaukee, we have a system of justice that can't be beat anywhere else in this country. And with your help, I think we did that. So on behalf of myself, on behalf of every participant in this trial, thank you very much for the contribution you've made. And as you walk away and you look back on this a year from now, 2 years from now, I hope that you will be proud as proud as I am of you for the contribution that you've made to the justice system in this community and in this country. So, how else do you say it? Thanks, Dankeschön. The jurors will now be excused. I'll come back in a few moments and chat with you a little more. But thank you very much.
All right, please.
Okay, first of all, Mr. McCann, you have a motion at this time?
For judgment on the verdict, Your Honor.
And I would make the opposite.
Defense motion is denied. The state's motion is granted.
Judge,
The next question is a matter of disposition. We talked a little bit about the timing on that in chambers. Mr. Boyle?
I think I'm going to ask for 10 o'clock on Monday morning.
Joining the motion.
Let me say this, that it is the practice of this court that whenever an attorney asks for some additional time to prepare for disposition, so long as it's reasonable, that's granted. I think a request that we do this at 10 o'clock Monday morning is a reasonable request, and therefore it's granted.
I would ask the court for a 10-minute contact visit in the back with my client and his father and stepmother. I'm told I got to ask that on the record.
Are we joining that request?
It's so ordered.
Thank you.
Court's in recess.
Judge, you had indicated you were going to speak to another issue. Family, the impact
Yes, okay, that's... I talked to the victim witness people a little bit about this earlier. In terms of the victim's families being able to give an impact statement at the time of sentencing, the court will hear that, but you have to understand what we have now is 15 families. So what I'm asking is that within each family, you designate a spokesman. And the court will hear from that spokesman for a reasonable period of time. I hope you appreciate that we do have to move this disposition on. So I'm trying to get a fair balance here so that everybody has a chance to be heard, but yet that we can do the work that's necessary to be done in this court. That'll be Monday at 10 o'clock. Court's in recess.
Circuit Judge Lawrence Graham addressing the court after the verdict was released in the Jeffrey Dahmer sanity trial. Once again, divided over a difficult decision, the jurors nonetheless agreed on 15 counts that Jeffrey Dahmer was sane when he committed the murders to which he has pled guilty, but insane. There were two dissenters all through those 15 counts, two members of the jury who did not believe that Jeffrey Dahmer was sane at the time. They disagreed each time a count was read. But under the peculiarities of the law under which Jeffrey Dahmer has pled, only 10 jurors were required to agree, and they did agree that Jeffrey Dahmer was sane when he committed each of the crimes for which he has pled guilty. CNN's Margaret Lowrie has been following this case very closely. She joins us now from just outside the Milwaukee courtroom. Margaret?
Jonathan, it's been a very interesting verdict for all of us here. Interesting in that all of these 7 experts who have appeared over the 3 weeks of this trial have testified in some form or another that Jeffrey Dahmer, in fact, did have some form of a mental disease. What was necessary under Wisconsin law was to prove insanity were 2 things. It's a 2-pronged procedure. I have a copy of the questionnaire that the jurors had to fill out in regard to each of the counts. And the first question was, of course, did Jeffrey Dahmer have a mental disease? Now, as we've just heard, in all 15 cases, the jurors said he did not. Therefore, they did not go on to the second part of the questionnaire, which reads that if they did answer affirmatively to the first question, did they find as a result of the disease that Jeffrey Dahmer was unable to either appreciate the wrongfulness of his acts, or even if he could do that, could tell right from wrong, could he nonetheless not conform his behavior to the requirements of the law? Now, all the experts we heard really said in some form or another that he did have a mental disease, but that the defense experts said that he was unable to control his actions, as the second part of this questionnaire asks, and the prosecution's expert said that he was in control and was able to control his actions.
Okay, CNN's Margaret Lowrie, thanks very much for that. Once again, if you've just joined us, Jeffrey Dahmer ruled sane at the time of each of the 15 murders that he has confessed to committing. He is on his way to mandatory life sentence. We'll have more details, of course, on this story. Our extensive coverage will continue, but we'll take a break in a moment, and CNN Weekend will return with Newsmaker Saturday.
Some days my minor arthritis acts up, and I really feel the pain. I used to take aspirin. Now I've switched to Advil. Advil relieves the pain in my stiff joints. In fact, one Advil is as effective as 2 regular aspirin. And Advil is gentler to my stomach. Maybe that's why doctors recommend Advil for minor arthritis pain more than any other brand. For my pain, I simply prefer Advil. Advil, advanced medicine for pain.
Constance Baker Motley has opened many doors to women and black people during her distinguished career. She first gained recognition as an attorney defending civil rights for the NAACP. Her most famous victory was the case of James Meredith against the University of Mississippi, which resulted in his admission and led to the integration of other Southern universities. She became the first black woman to serve as New York State Senator in 1964. A year later, she was the first woman, as well as first black person, to be elected Manhattan Borough President. Then, in 1966, President Lyndon Johnson appointed her U.S. District Judge for Southern New York, making her the first black woman to be a federal judge. I'm Meshach Taylor, saluting Constance Baker Motley and celebrating a great moment in our history.